Your weekly horoscope with Jerry and Matt.
Audio Jungle.
Hey, good evening, horror fans. Welcome to another edition of the Weekly Horoscope. I'm your host, Jerry, here with my partner, Matt. And Matt, today is the first day of summer, the first full day of summer in the Northern Hemisphere. And our category kind of ties in nicely. We didn't actually plan this, but it really does fit. We're going to talk about when nature attacks. And summer typically brings people out into the water, camping, hiking, all sorts of outdoor activities where you encounter these types of dangers and risks that these movies are based on. And this category kind of has a history going back to, I would say, probably The Birds as an early example. And it was big in the 70s where you had, Grizzly and you had Orca. And of course, the absolute pinnacle of this category is Jaws, in my opinion. But we wanted to go with some unique and different movies here. What do you think of the category, and what do you think of our selections this week?
Yeah, as a category, I understand what you mean. It's going back to like birds and Jaws, but when animals attack is such a timeless subject. It goes back to the beginning of mankind. You go back to the caves with the cave drawings of hunters with spears and weapons and animals, going back to ancient dragon mythology from thousands of years ago. And we've kind of always had, since the humans emerged out of wilderness, had this confrontation and fear and understanding of how powerful nature is, even to this day. And that's why it just makes such a fun topic for horror.
I actually explained to my wife, I had read that fear of snakes is actually woven into our DNA as a protective device from ancient times. And that is why I was so scared of snakes. I can't help it.
You can't help it. They've actually done studies where they've showed pictures of people with guns and snakes, and people are more afraid of snakes than guns.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
We
have an irrational fear. If you take a snake and drop it in a room full of primates, monkeys, apes, whatever, they're all hitting the ceiling. Like, it's just a primate thing. It goes back for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years.
Yeah, and in history is, kind of Jaws kind of kicked off where everyone was trying to duplicate that success. Yeah, and there's been a bunch of shark movies, and there's been snake movies, and there's been Australia produced a pretty good wild boar movie called Razorback in the early 80s. There's been alligator and crocodile movies and all kinds of different aspects of nature that can really sink their teeth into you, if you will. We start with a crocodile movie from 2007. The movie's called Rogue, and it was an independent Australian film directed by Greg McLean, who's best known, and this was his follow-up to Wolf Creek, which kind of fit right in the torture porn type of movie, but had some cool, interesting Australian characters and some outback scenes. But what's your thoughts on this movie, Matt?
Rogue is somewhat of a formulaic movie. It's kind of safe and derivative as far as the story that it delivers, but I still think it's fun. I think it's a great creature feature film, but it uses a practical monster, and they portray it at a mythological size that devours tourists in the real life setting. It has a great, fantastic, has a really good music score, and the tension between the actors, and has great pacing. It's only an hour and a half long. It doesn't drag on. I think this is just a really fun movie.
Yeah, it's a quick hit, and it's ironic. In 2007, Australia released two crocodile movies, produced independently from each other, separate from each other. Dark Water or Black Water and Rogue.
Yep.
And I preferred Rogue of the two, but
I did too. Yeah.
One of the things I like best about this movie is they show tons of beautiful nature shots.
Yeah,
and,
with the drones,
and natural wildlife.
Yeah.
And there's some scenes with crocodiles in their natural habitat that are almost Discovery Channel-esque in their presentation, which really, I think, adds some authenticity to what you're seeing.
Yeah, I agree. That's part of I think some of the great cinematography that they had in this movie. There's one of the first things I wrote down when I was rewatching it again. I was like, man, I forgot like how beautiful some of this is, and they layered it with really nice music too. And it's just they kind of juxtapose that with the horror of the crocodile later on, and I think it comes together really well.
Yeah, we start with our travel journalist, one of our main characters, Pete, and he's taking a boat tour from a small town. And this town it's hot. There's flies everywhere. It's sticky. The locals don't appreciate the tourists. It looks like the place is about to fall over. He's in getting a cup of coffee, and all you see is hunting memorabilia and news stories on the wall about people catching crocodiles, and just really kind of paints a scuzzy picture of the small town they're in.
Yeah, just because like a hot, humid, sweaty town, everything's just kind of, the guy's like he's got like the half shirt on with the sleeves off, and he's sweating, like wiping himself down, and everyone just looks miserable trying to drink a beer in the middle of the day.
Nothing about this says tourism to me.
Right, yeah.
But he finds the boat, and he boards the boat with other tourists, and there's families and there's kids, and it's a crocodile boat tour. So they take off, and the boat is run by Kate, who's another one of our main characters. She's a wildlife researcher, and even on the boat, I was struck by this as something that really wasn't in the script. But you can see the actors. There's flies everywhere, and they keep landing on their faces when they're trying to deliver lines.
And there's one in his coffee.
Yeah, the one in the coffee may have been in the script, but it looked uncomfortable to even deliver their lines.
Yeah,
flies landing at the corner of your mouth when you're trying to talk. It just added like I said, a uneasiness to it.
And directors will do that on purpose. It's almost like they just create the method acting. They put them in the environment and be like, we're just going to film them in this awful environment, and they're just going to have to deal with it. And we'll get pictures of them swatting the stuff around. Like, all right, keep rolling.
Yeah. They pass another boat, and here's where we get to see a lot of the scenery as they move down the river. And this boat is like using fishing poles and holding meat up out of the water. And we're watching crocodiles jump out of the water to demonstrate their power and athleticism to snatch the meat. And it's pretty intimidating, really, when you watch it.
Yeah, and it's funny because there's a part of me where I'm sitting on my couch eating potato chips, going, "I'd do that. I'd go on this trip." It's like, no, you wouldn't.
Yeah, you think you would? Yeah,
it does seem cool. Yeah, it does seem like a really cool trip.
Except for the heat and the flies, but yeah. It seems interesting.
Yeah.
We see our boat is cut off by two locals in a small boat, Neil and Colin, and they obviously are locals. They know Kate, and they're being extremely obnoxious, and they won't get out of the way, and they won't leave. And a couple of the tourists kind of stand up for Kate and tell them to back off, including our journalist Pete.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually they play a little game of chicken, and Neil gets knocked into the water. And Neil is a pre-Avatar Sam Worthington.
Sam Worthington, where he's actually using his Australian accent, which was kind of cool.
Yes, he's a local, fit right in.
Yep.
They finish the tour, and they're about to turn back, and several of the people have schedules to meet where they have to get on buses and move to other destinations. But they see a distress flare a couple miles down the river and are compelled to check it out. When they get there, there's a small boat capsized, but no people. And they're trying to figure out, what happened here. And suddenly they are rammed by something very large in the water.
Very powerful, very fast, just boom.
You don't see it. They just wham. And the boat is leaking, and they're going to sink. They manage to get it sputtered over to a small island in the middle of this wide river. And the boat is dead, and people are freaking out. And there's a couple standing there talking, and suddenly the man is plucked from the edge of the water and gone. And we don't really see this. He just disappears, and there's a ripple in the water. His wife obviously is distraught, and it puts more people into a panic. And they also realize this is a tidal river.
Yeah, the one guy points it out that it's going to start lifting up, and they're going to have this little teeny cartoonist type like island left right there with like one little tree hanging out, and the thing's it's going to be nighttime. We're all going to die. And so at this point in the movie, we really get this typical group panic argue, and this was part of the formulaic part that I was talking about earlier.
Yep, and you have your mix of characters. There's a family. There's a there's an older couple, and the man's a little gruff, and things that seem like you've seen in every group setting, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, the flares and the med kit have floated away out of the boat, so they're gone, and they don't know what to do. And Neil and Colin, the two locals on the small boat, happen to show back up, and they're kind of heckling from the water, like, "Hey, what happened?" And all of a sudden, their boat is just completely destroyed.
Yeah.
Flips out of the water. They're both spilled into the water.
Yeah.
And
for a second, you think they're going to help. They're like, "Hey, wait, what happened, guys?" Like they for a second, there's like a hint of humanity, and then nope, they get thrown right into.
Well, Neil, Sam Worthington, he swims to the island, but his buddy Colin never resurfaces. He's gone.
Yeah. And you kind of wait for it for a couple minutes. Like, you kind of like, is that going to come back into play? And like, he just never comes back.
Yeah. And Neil does show some humanity. He gets to the island, and now he's in this with them. So, they're in a shared bit of trauma. He becomes more of a normal, decent guy.
Yeah, it becomes that trope where the bad guy starts leading the group because he's the rough and guff. He's gonna
he's the local, and he should really at this point lead the group, but
right.
And he does. In that vein, he volunteers he's going to take a rope and swim quietly over to the mainland and hook up the rope as a means for people to escape.
Yeah, this scene reminded me of Descent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Scene. Yeah.
And he does. Night falls and the water's starting to rise, and he quietly takes it over. And Pete, they're no longer adversaries. He's helping him feed the line, working with him. He makes it over, and he ties up the rope on fairly high up on a tree, and creates a zip line for people to escape. And the first thing you think of is you're looking at this group of people going, there's a couple with a younger daughter, and the mother's sick, and you're thinking, some of these people cannot make this over. They're not going to be able to shuffle across this rope all this way.
Yeah. It's hard to do that at that length.
Yeah, exactly. The woman who lost her husband, she wants to go first, and they let her go. And unfortunately, she freezes halfway. She's just sitting over the water, not moving.
Yeah.
And the family, the father, wife, and daughter, they get anxious. And the father puts his daughter up there and says, "Go." And then he gets on there as well. And they were very clear that this isn't going to hold three people. So
they try to stop him. Yeah. And he's like, "Get out of my way." And he jumps up there, and they're like, "No, you idiot." Yeah.
The group's shouting at him, and he's just, "Go, go, go." Where are they going? The woman's frozen halfway. They're either going to have to knock her off or convince her to go, or they're stuck too.
Yeah. Yeah.
But don't even make it that far, because the rope will not hold all three of them. At the same time this is happening, the crocodile attacks Neil on the land side that he is on, and the big supporting tree that he'd hooked it to was a dead tree, and it completely falls over.
Yeah, from the weight of the people.
Spills all three of them into the water. Now, the three of them do make it back to the island, which you're thinking, they're probably sunk, but they do make it back. And the father is standing on the shore, and he's apologizing, and he's like, I'm sorry. I lost control. And this is when the croc pops out of the water, grabs him, and tosses him up in the air.
Yeah.
And it's our first good look at it, and it's massive.
Massive.
It's described as a 25-foot crocodile. So it's huge, and it has a girth to it that's just unbelievable.
Yeah, it's the girth, I think, that makes it look bigger than 25 feet. Because I felt like I was like, that's got to be bigger than 25 feet. But I don't know. It's just the girth that makes it look huge. It looks like it's 35 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, like you said, because of and they describe early in the movie that, they're like dinosaurs that are still alive.
Yeah, technically they are, I thought.
Yeah.
I mean, because how old they are.
Yeah, so this giant croc grabs the father that he threw up in the air,
and he doesn't kill him. He's kind of like he's screaming as he's taking him away, and he takes him underwater. So if anything, he drowns, because they say earlier in the movie what they do is they take their food and they bring it down to like a log or something, and they store it for later.
Yeah.
So like he wasn't even going to devour him right there. He was just taking him down for food, for a snack for later.
Yeah, but he pulled him under, and he was gone.
Yep.
And so Pete gets an idea. They're running out of options here. He gets the idea that there's a pronged anchor in the boat that's mostly sunk, but he's thinking he can use it to bait the crocodile and keep him occupied so that people can walk across this water, swim across this water to get to the land. Well, now we know Neil made it over to the land and he still got attacked by the crocodile. So at least land gives you an option of walking and getting somewhere else, but you're not completely safe.
Mm-mm.
They decide they're going to they find two large dead birds and they put them on the hooks.
Well, they had those ducks from earlier when they were duck hunting. They were on the boat. Yeah.
Yeah. And they used those. They were originally going to use Kate's dog, which Kate was not a fan of.
That was an interesting part of the movie. A little 2-minute. She was like, "Well, I sacrificed my daughter," and she's like holding on to the dog, like so. And I was like, "Whoa, where's this going?" And then someone comes in with ducks, and I was just like, "All right," they relieved that real quick.
It was like, "Well, what are we going to use for bait?" And then everybody looks at the dog, and Kate's like, "Oh, no."
Yeah,
but they used the ducks and the geese, whatever they were, and so that becomes the bait, and it works. The croc is a hold of the giant pronged blades and the forks, tongs, and he's wrestling with it, and Pete's holding the other end, which Pete couldn't have been holding the other end. Like, what are you? You're not going to pull him in,
right.
So as far as I'm concerned,
it's just like rope fishing. He tells him nothing's changed.
He could have tied that around a tree, and he could have left with him. He's going to
suck you in.
Yeah. You have no shot whatsoever.
Yeah.
He should have tied it around a tree and left with everybody else. But
try wrestling a 20-pound marlin. This thing's like a 2-ton croc. Like, what are you gonna do?
Exactly. But it works to the point where all the people get across the water and get over to the land, and except Kate, she waits and she's the last one to go, and the croc gets free of the hooks, and he takes Kate. He swims over and he grabs her just like he did with the man, and he takes her away. So Pete's left by himself. He takes the dog and he crosses the water, thinking, well, the croc's occupied because he took Kate, and he's kind of off all on his own. He can't find the rest of the people. They've walked ahead. They're gone by the time he gets there, and the dog goes to a hollow of a tree and goes inside. And he follows him to try to get the dog and falls.
And I'll say a funny side note about this movie. The dog's name is Kevin. So they gave him a normal person name. So
yeah.
I thought it wasn't like Rocco, or you know what I mean? Like, it was just like they're just like, "Hey, Kevin," like it's another actor in the movie.
Another character,
yeah.
So Kevin goes into this hole, and Pete falls and ends up sliding in, and it's this big cavernous underground lair. Well, the reason Kevin went in and he's barking and going crazy is because there's where we find Kate's body.
Mm-hmm.
And Kate is she's bloody. You can see she's got blood on her chest, maybe a bite in the side, and definitely on her leg. And she's passed out cold.
Yeah, so it's kind of like they've entered like the final boss scene. Yeah.
The showdown location.
The showdown, yeah.
And we hear the croc roar, and it echoes in the chamber. And it's very intimidating.
Right, like he's in his castle.
Yeah. He grabs Kate, and Pete grabs her and tries to get her out. But the croc arrives, and it's got fresh meat hanging in its teeth. Yeah. It's so massive it barely fits around some of these entrances.
Yeah, it looks like it's like a leg dangling out the side of his mouth and stuff.
Yeah. That's good stuff. So he waits, and the croc kind of crawls into a corner, kind of sits down and closes its eyes like it's nap time. After eating all that delicious flesh, he needed a nap.
Yeah, and I'll say that for 2007, this was pretty cool CGI. I think they did a good job with it.
Yeah. You're immersed in the story. At no point are you like, oh, that looks stupid.
Yeah, they did a great job with the CGI with the croc. It doesn't seem like too B-ish,
Yeah, so he thinks, okay, the croc's asleep, So he continues carrying out Kate, and he's trying to do it quietly, and she's unconscious. And he stops and looks back, and the croc's not where it was sitting, and it's right behind him in the water, and just starts thrashing.
Yeah.
Finally, it whacks him with its tail, like a Godzilla move.
Yeah.
It just
That's what I was
smacks him
thinking too.
He goes flying off to the side, sends him into the water.
Yeah.
Pete climbs out and he picks up a large stick that's laying there, and he's going to use that to fight him off. And he sticks it out as the approaching crocodile, and he just snaps the stick in half with one bite. It's like, okay, that didn't work.
That did nothing. Yeah.
He tosses Pete aside and then bites off half of his hand. Just takes it clean off in one chomp. And again, the effects were pretty good.
Yeah, and because you could tell like how some of the teeth stick out of the crocodile. Like you could tell like his hand it just shut, and like that part, like the fang just got him or something like that. Yeah, it was pretty cool. It was vicious.
Yeah, and this isn't an overly bloody movie by any means, but
not at all.
What they did well.
Yeah, it was good execution.
And this was an independently produced film. Greg McLean produced, wrote it, and directed it. So you don't look at it. And with some of those nature shots, and with some of the, you don't look at this and go, "Oh, this was a cheap movie." It just flows like a well done movie.
Yeah, I agree.
So now he's sitting there with half a hand, and he finds a piece of metal laying on the ground, and he picks it up and he sticks the croc through the eye. We managed to find an eye impalement for you, even
for an animal.
Yeah. Which obviously sets the croc's going bananas at this point. Mm-hmm. And Kate starts to wake up, and the croc turns and goes after her now. But the nook that Peter had set her in, he can't get his huge head in there. So he's just chomping and flailing, but his head's too big to fit in the little nook. So she's safe at this point.
And he's like trying to rotate. He's like rotating in circles, trying to I was like, oh, it's a classic croc move.
Right. So it goes back into the water. Now it's headed back towards Peter. Peter grabs half of the splintered stick that the croc had bitten, and now it's got a sharp, jagged edge. And he kind of leans against a rock and leans back with the sticks, put it out like he's jousting.
It's a Braveheart move. Remember when it had?
Definitely is. And the croc charges, and Peter impales him with the stick, and it goes through the roof of his mouth and out the top of his head, and it lands basically on top of Peter.
Yeah, it was really cool because he's like inside the mouth of it, but like he's just enough where they can't close it because he gets him. I liked it.
And it's thrashing on top of him, and then finally dies. And Peter drags himself out from underneath, and he picks up Kate and takes her outside, and the sun has now come up. And he hears noises, and he finds the rest of the group, and there's rescue choppers and medics.
They always seem to get there too late.
Yeah. Well, he manages to get there just in time because, and they're taking people to the medic, but, he lost half a hand, but he doesn't need to go. He's fine.
Yeah. He's like, no, I'm fine. Yeah.
He's a journalist. He's tough.
I've got to write this story.
And the closing scene as we go to the credits, Kate's saved. She's going to be okay. She's got chomp marks on her, but she'll be fine. The closing scene as they go to the credits is we go back to the cafe where he got the fly in the coffee at the beginning, and it zooms in on like a newspaper article detailing Pete's battle with the giant monster and him saving Kate, which is kind of like a full circle moment for the movie. But
and it has that one moment where they're talking. He's like, traveling's overrated. And like he's like the guy who travels and like writes stuff. And I have to wonder if the director just had some horrible experience. And he's like, I have to make this movie.
I thought it was a good movie.
It's fun. It's 100% fun. Yeah.
It doesn't break any ground. It doesn't, set anything on fire. But it was an enjoyable movie. I really was surprised after Wolf Creek that it was a calm and subdued and fairly straightforward tale.
Yep. Well, I think maybe he was going for something more general audience, something he could sell more wide range. I don't know. It's a fun movie. It's one for the DVD collection. I'd recommend it to anyone.
Yeah. yeah, if you want a giant killer crocodile movie,
Yeah.
that's one for you.
It's got good pacing. It's only an hour and a half. It's entertaining.
Yeah, absolutely. Our second film that we're going to talk about this week is a completely different animal altogether and a completely different tone
Different
to the
tone.
movie.
Yeah.
We're going to do Cocaine Bear from 2023, directed by Elizabeth Banks, who's probably best known for her comedy work. She's in the Pitch Perfect movies. In fact, she directed the second one.
The second one. Yep.
And really, I was interested. I meant to see this in the theaters, and I didn't get to. But I watched it for this, and what a crazy, wild movie this is.
There's a lot happening from scene to scene to scene to scene in the beginning. They really keep the pace going. They never really let you sit down and let anything marinate too long. There's a lot of humor in this entire movie, and it's Elizabeth Banks, so you expect that.
Yeah.
But the kills are just vicious, and it's fun. It's just a fun movie.
The best part's the kills. I'm gonna get that right out of the way up front. The the character development, like you said, this moves really fast.
Mhm.
Character development is there's not much.
Yeah.
We get presented pretty simple, straightforward characters, and they
Yeah.
are what they are through the whole movie.
And it's a lot of satire on like the drug dealer bad guy stuff. Like we'll talk about it as the scenes come up. But there's really two things you need to know about this movie. It's about a bear on cocaine, and it's directed by Elizabeth Banks.
Yeah. You see the title, and you see you see 10 seconds of the preview, and you're like, oh, okay, I know what this movie is.
Yep.
We start with a man in a plane. He's throwing duffel bags of cocaine out, and then he's manic. He's kind of crazy, and he's going to parachute out.
Stuff.
Yeah, he's just like high energy. He's gonna parachute out after all the cocaine, and he's gonna have all this cocaine. And as he's exiting the plane, and he's the only one on the plane is destined to just crash.
Yep, he's evacuating.
Yeah, as he's going out, he hits his head on the metal doorway, is knocked unconscious, and just falls out, unable to pull his cord or anything else. So the story begins with just a splat. We don't see the splat, but we know it's happening.
It's assumed. Yeah.
Yeah. So then we cut to a couple. They're out hiking, and they're getting married, and they're talking about their wedding, and they manage to reach a very high peak, and they're kind of celebrating their accomplishment. And they look over and they see a bear banging its head on a tree and acting very strange. And they're like, oh, bears won't bother you. We're going to be fine. And
well, in the beginning of the movie, right after the scene where they're throwing the stuff, he's throwing the bags out of the plane. After that scene, it cuts to like writing, and it says that gives little facts about bears, and then it says source Wikipedia.
yeah, a little tongue in cheek humor.
Yeah. The whole movie's kind of like that.
Yeah. And the bear, they're like, oh, it's fine. They look away, and then they look back, and the bear's coming towards them, and they run. And it catches the woman, and it just mauls her, and then you see it throw her severed leg back at her fiance.
Yeah. And he's just staring at it in horror, and then takes off.
And that's it. Cuts that scene. It's like, okay,
first bear scene. Yeah.
We cut to the drug dealers, who are obviously looking for their product that has gone missing. Sid is the leader, and it's the late great Ray Liotta.
His last movie. Well, it's the second to last movie he did, but
yeah, and he's kind of underused here, and his character's a little shallow and cliche, but just seeing him on screen was kind of a pleasure.
Yeah, I think they do. I think this is the parody part, like, because he's supposed to be this like badass drug dealer, and like they're in a Chuck E. Cheese type thing, and he's with his grandson who's in a ball pit.
Yeah,
and like they kind of lean into that joke the whole movie. Like,
yeah. So he sends part of his crew. He sends David and his son Eddie, and Eddie is the father to the grandson, and he's depressed, and he hasn't seen his son, and he doesn't want to go, and Eddie's just a mess.
Which is another parody. It's like he's supposed to be a thug, like the thug of a drug lord, and he's just like brokenhearted over this girl, and he can't get it together.
He's a reluctant thug for sure.
Yeah.
And then we meet Dee Dee and Henry. They're two young kids who they want to paint the waterfall in the park. So they skip school and they go hiking to paint the waterfall.
And I thought this was another example of two great child actors. I think movies have just gotten better with this somehow.
Yeah, they're so good. They find a pack of cocaine and they start talking. They know it's cocaine for somehow. And
they say that she picks up the brick or the package of it, and she's like, oh, the dare officer showed us this in school, remember? Like that's how they know the school, but they introduced it to him through the dare program or something.
And the young boy's like, yeah, I do cocaine all the time. Like they're just like completely talking crap.
They're like 11 years old.
Yeah. And they think you're supposed to eat it. So she's like, oh, go ahead, do cocaine. And then like he's like, all right, yeah. And then
how much are you supposed to do? A tablespoon? And
he puts it in his mouth and he's just like, oh, no, that's awful. And she's like, I'll do cocaine. And she puts her, and it's kind of ridiculous. Like
it's insane that would have killed them. Yeah.
I never knew an 11-year-old that wanted to do cocaine at that point in their life. So but it was kind of,
it's over the top. Yeah.
It was they're kind of good-natured kids, and it just seemed kind of funny.
Well, they're playing hooky. They're trying to be cool and trying to impress. They kind of like there's like this like flirtatious thing between them, but they're childhood friends and they're trying to like one up each other.
Yeah, a little bit of rebellious streak, and they find another pack of cocaine, and this one's ripped open, and they see the bear, and the bear sneezes cocaine on them all over their face, and they run. And then we cut to see our park ranger, Liz. Liz is my favorite character in the movie, and Liz has the funniest line in the movie, in my opinion. She's waiting for a nature activist, Peter, to show up.
Yeah.
And she's got a crush on Peter. So she's wearing lipstick and perfume, and one of the punk kids that hangs around mentions her the perfume she's wearing. Mm-hmm. And she really wants to impress Peter. And so Peter shows up, and she's flirting with him a little bit, and they're going to go check out all the nature things and make sure everything's right up to snuff.
And Peter's a complete dork. Like he's wearing like a shirt that's too tight and messy with like shorts and boots and like white socks like halfway up his shin. Like he just looks like an idiot.
Yeah. Well, at this point, Dee Dee's mom, Sari, shows up and talks about the missing kids, and so together, the three of them are going off to find them. And my favorite line of the movie was a under your breath subtle one that people might have missed. But there's stuffed animals all in the park ranger office, and as they're leaving, Peter mentions that to Liz that she really needs to dust off her beaver, and she says, well, "I'm trying." that one cracked me up.
Yeah. This whole movie has a lot of subtle humor to it, and it's if you catch it, this movie's a riot. Yeah.
So the dealers show up, and David goes into the bathroom, and he gets jumped by the three punks. The one that was hanging out in the ranger station has two friends, and they jump, and they don't know they're jumping a drug dealer, but he beats them all severely, and convinces one of them to tell him where the rest of the cocaine is, because the punks found it and they stashed it away.
That's Ice Cube's son, by the way.
Yeah. O'Shea Jackson.
Yes.
And he's good. He's in a lot of stuff, and he's always good. So he grabs him and he's like, all right, show us. So him and Eddie and the punk are going to find the gazebo where all the cocaine is hidden. Meanwhile, our Liz, the ranger, and Pete and the mother, they find Henry. They find one of the kids. He's hiding up in a tree, and they said, what are you hiding? He tells them about the bear, and the bear shows up and tears a big chunk out of Liz's ass.
Yeah. Knocks her back. Yeah, it doesn't kill her or anything, just kind of grabs her and throws her and knocks her back. Yeah.
And for the rest of this movie, she's walking around with a just chunk ripped out of her ass just hanging out there. And Peter climbs up a tree.
He was also thrown too. Yeah.
Yeah, and he runs and he climbs up a tree.
Yeah.
and in getting thrown and climbing, he gets cocaine all over him.
Yeah.
So the bear is rapidly climbing up the tree. And before he showed up, they're talking, well, why'd you climb a tree? Bears can climb trees, you know. But then Peter does the exact same thing. So the bear is climbing up after Henry, and it stops, and it smells the cocaine all over Peter.
Right.
And this part was kind of cool. It basically sprints down the tree, across the ground, and up another tree.
Yeah, and the camera pans back and it shows it happening. Yeah, it was a good shot.
And he's motoring like wow, I didn't know a bear could go that fast.
They can go
or
30
climb
miles,
a tree that fast.
They can go 30 miles an hour. I had to look it up. They are fast.
Wow. It sprints up the tree and kills Peter, ripping off and throwing his leg away. For some reason, this bear just loves to throw your leg away after it kills you.
I guess it's a good part of meat right there or something. I don't know. But then he drops down to the ground, and then there's cocaine on his leg, and the bear goes, and he rips the line right off of his leg.
Right off his leg, yeah. Yeah.
Because it's Cocaine Bear.
For sure it is. Liz takes off back to the ranger station, and the bear follows her. And Henry and the mom continue to the waterfall looking for Dee Dee, because that's where she was headed. When Liz gets back to the ranger station, the two beat up punks are there, and they're waiting there when she arrives, and they shut the door because the bear's coming. And she gets her gun ready because she's a ranger, and she tells them, like, you know, I'm a fully licensed officer. I have a gun.
Mm-hmm.
She tells the one to open the door so she can shoot the bear. He opens the door and then sticks his head in to curiously look at the bear.
Mm-hmm.
And Liz blows a hole right through his.
She closes her eyes a little bit, which,
yeah, she doesn't look to be well trained with her firearm, but
no.
This punk just now has a huge hole where his head used to be.
Yeah, and it gets all over the bear.
Yeah, it does. It's only fair. He's been making a mess everywhere.
Yeah, and he's like shakes his head, and there's like guts coming off him and stuff, and brains.
Yeah. The other punk is now, they shut the door, and he's hiding, with his back against it, and the paw just breaks through the little glass looking window and just rips his face off with his claw. Just the kills, like you said, are very cool, and some of them are very clever and unique.
It's fun. Yeah, it's this movie's has part slasher to it with all the kills.
The main police officer who's investigating the whole disappearing cocaine and the dead jumper, he shows up, and he's heading off to look for the cocaine as well. And then two ambulance attendees arrive at the ranger station, and they find Liz injured and the other two dead. And she's just like, she can't even spit it out. She's like, bear.
Yeah, she takes the stethoscope and says it right into the stethoscope at some point. Yeah.
So they send her. She sends the ambulance attendees to look in a closet, and they open the closet, and there's the bear. So they distract it with all the drugs and medication that they have, and they're going to all leave in the ambulance. And the guy's last, and he's trying to get away, and he ends up running and jumping in the back of the ambulance, but the doors are open, and the female ambulance attendee, she's driving, and they're booking down the road. And this was a kind of a scene that they showed a lot in all the previews. The bear starts running down the road like ridiculously fast.
Yeah. Well, like I said, they can go 30 miles an hour, but they must have been going 40, 50. So, but it's cocaine. But
30 miles an hour without cocaine.
Yeah.
You're going to ramp that up a little bit.
Cocaine bear, right?
Yeah. So and again, Liz was my favorite character because this is also my favorite kill. The bear jumps into the back of the ambulance, and Liz is now on a gurney due to her shredded ass. And the gurney flips out of the ambulance, lands face first in the road, where she just skids along the road, wiping her face completely off as she goes.
Yeah, and they show her face is kind of melting down, grinding down into the cement, and she can't do anything with her arms because she's, like you said, in the gurney.
My favorite kill of the whole movie.
Me too. Yeah,
I thought it just was unique. It was cool.
Yeah. So seeing that on the big screen was fun. I was like, oh, did not see that coming.
The bear gets the male ambulance attendee and rips his arm off. He must not have been able to reach his leg, but he likes to remove limbs. He tears his arm off, and the woman driving, she hits a tree at full speed because she's looking backwards, and it just launches her straight out of the window, straight at the camera.
Pops right out.
Splat.
Yeah.
So
Just
that
rolls right to the camera, and then you just see her dead lying face right there.
Yeah, that was another. There's another good.
That whole
kill,
scene
right?
was cool. I really
Back to
liked
back,
that whole scene. Yeah.
Now, when I saw the previews, I thought the bear running and jumping and climbing in the ambulance might have been a little cheesy, but then the two immediate, 3 kills, but 2 of them were really, really cool.
Yeah. Well, starting from the cabin all the way to that whole sequence of events right there, I thought was great. I mean, none of that was wasted footage. None of that dragged on. I mean, that whole sequence of events, if it was 15 minutes or whatever it was, I thought they did it really well.
Yeah. That was the best part of the movie. That stretch, in my opinion.
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
The cop somehow manages to get to the gazebo before the dealers get there with the one punk, which really
it was an
make
accident.
sense.
It was a complete accident. He sits down to rest, and he like looks up, and he's like, "What's that?" And he sees the bag, and he's like, "Wait, that's a duffel bag." And like it was a complete accident. It was a happenstance.
It was an accident, but he left from the same place they left from.
True.
Well, after they left, but he made it there before them without even knowing he was going there.
Yeah.
Didn't make a lot of sense.
Maybe them getting beat up and everything was kind of the holdup when he got beat up and held up in and then they had to start trekking back.
He collects all the duffel bags and he puts them up on the roof, and he's up there with them, and the dealers show up and they have kind of a standoff because they can't get to the drugs, and he's not letting them up, and he's going to shoot them. And in fact, he shoots off 2 of David's fingers. And to make the tension worse, the bear shows up. And for some reason just comes over and lays on top of Eddie.
It's exhausted. Yeah. It was up from its cocaine run. It just passes out.
and it's laying on Eddie in a inverted what you would call a 69 position.
Yeah.
Because they refer to the bear as a he, and he's like, no, it's a she. Like, how do you know? And he's like,
I can feel it on my ear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the cop decides to throw the cocaine down to distract the bear. And the standoff ends when suddenly the cop is shot. And they're looking around. Nobody knows who shot him. And we find Sid. Ray Liotta has showed up and shot him with a rifle from a distance away. And he's laying up on top of the gazebo, and the cop's still alive, and his female partner shows up, and he thinks, oh, good. And it turns out she's aligned with the dealer. Like, she's there to help them, not him.
Mm. Yeah, that's the twist. Yeah.
And the twist didn't really pay off, because nothing, like, he didn't die because she showed up. It was almost irrelevant to the story.
I felt that way too. It was some kind of inserted, like,
I thought, it was a throw-in.
Yeah,
let's get this. Let's get the female cop in a few more scenes, because it really didn't impact anything.
Right, because they were already there and were calling Sid anyways, so it didn't. Yeah, it didn't matter.
Exactly. So they we cut to Mom and Henry, and they find the cave, and they find Dee Dee in the cave. And we see 2 bear cubs rolling around and covered in cocaine. These fellows were cute.
Yeah.
The dealers show up at the same cave at the same time looking for their product. And of course, the mama bear then shows up immediately after.
Yeah.
The mother takes the two kids. And there's kind of a standoff on this ledge. Nobody's really got anywhere to go. So she jumps off into the waterfall. Into the water, her and the 2 kids float down, and they appear to be safe.
It's their best bet.
Yeah, and it worked. They seem to be fine. Sid, being driven just by solely getting the cocaine, doesn't care about the bear, isn't worried. He shoots the bear, and the bear kind of falls to the side of the cliff and is kind of hanging down like on a little ledge. Appears to be dying.
I was kind of mad. I was like, "Hey, man, you just shot Cocaine Bear."
Right. No worries, because the 2 cubs are running around really upset now because their mama got shot. But a bag of coke falls, and it lands and splatters, and we see the cocaine dust just cascade over the head of the fallen bear, and it re-energizes, and Mama Bear's back.
Yeah. It was like a sensu bean. It just like rejuvenated her. Yeah.
And she comes up and she swipes and just rips out Sid's intestines, and they're just hanging there, and he's just looking there in shock.
The little cubs are like just pulling the intestines out and stuff. Yeah.
And and then he knocks the Sid's body off the cliff into the water below. Eddie and David had already jumped. They're like, we're out of here. And Sari and the kids make it home. And Eddie and David go back to, they kind of want to live a normal life. And Eddie decides, he's gonna go back and pick up his son. He took the cop's dog because there was this random dog running around. He's like, I'll bring the dog to my son. Maybe that'll help.
Yeah.
And that kind of wraps up the movie. So happy ending for everyone except for, the drug dealing bad guy.
Yeah. Yeah. And then at the end, I think they show that, they show at the very end the cocaine bear with the two cubs. They're a little bit older, and like there's someone in the woods. They just hear a voice like, "Oh, look at that bear," and then they just show like the bear's face again. That's kind of it.
Yeah, there must be enough cocaine to keep them going for years.
Yeah.
I this movie, my favorite part was the kills. A lot of the humor missed for me.
Yeah,
I some of it was really, really funny.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it was
yeah,
mildly amusing at best, I thought.
Very Saturday Night Live-ish, but some of it, I think the subtlety of the humor to me just got me real good. Like when David is on the phone, like they're having the classic bad guy is using the bad guy is calling his boss about an illegal thing at a payphone, right? That classic scene, we've seen that in so many movies.
Yeah.
And he's talking to Sid, and Sid's just yelling at his grandson in the background. Like, so it's like they're taking this trope of this like serious like drug deal conversation they're gonna have, and Sid's just like complaining about his grandson like goofing off in the background. And I thought it was funny how they just kind of inserted like they kind of like flipped all these tropes of all these serious movies on its head. And I appreciated that style of humor. It was funny.
I wonder if it's a movie better seen in a crowd at a theater.
That's how I saw it. It was almost sold out, and everyone was just laughing, and it was just kind of entertaining. Like, yeah, it was a big crowd thing. It was fun.
That would probably enhance the humor, and certain types of humor. Sometimes it hits your mood a certain way, and it's great, or it hits your mood a certain way.
Yeah, I agree. I
expected this to be funnier, in my opinion.
Yeah, I've seen movies that felt deadpan, and then you see it another day with like a friend. You're like, oh, this is kind of funnier than I thought, or vice versa. I've seen movies that were really funny, and I watched it again with a friend. I was like, I thought this was funnier.
Yeah, yeah. But all in all, an entertaining movie. You're never bored in this movie, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely worth the watch if you want to watch something fun and ridiculous.
You're waiting to see what craziness might happen next.
Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. But definitely a different type of movie from our first one, and different probably from most of the films that would fall in this category. So this probably stands alone in its uniqueness.
Very much a comedy horror. Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. And that wraps up this category. Again, I think it's a category that definitely could be revisited. There's a lot of these movies, and a lot of them are pretty darn good.
Yeah. I mean, going back to, Crocodile 1980, like Anaconda. I mean, there's hundreds of them that we could go over with these. We'll probably have to revisit this again.
And one of my favorite, when these conversations come up, one of my favorite questions to ask is, hey, what's the second best shark movie of all time?
The Meg.
That's your vote?
I don't know. Just off the top of my head, it's one of them.
Mine would be The Shallows, but The
Shallows.
I always think that's an interesting conversation when you're in this category of movies. I don't ever ask what's the best shark movie of all time, because if anybody says anything other than Jaws, I don't want to talk to them anymore.
That is the shark movie.
But what's the second best shark movie of all time? And that creates
That's a good question.
Yeah, so that could be a category in itself.
Sharknado?
Probably not that one. But you never know. Well,
yeah, there's a lot of them. Yeah. You know what? We're gonna have to do a shark movie episode then, and not Jaws. Two other movies that go against Jaws. That's what we'll have to do.
That'll be our category. What's the second best shark movie of all time? And you pick yours.
You
and
pick one.
mine.
I'll pick one, and Yeah, we'll go after it.
There we go. All right. Well, that wraps up When Nature Attacks. Welcome to the first day of summer, and have a great one. We will catch you next time on the Weekly Horoscope. I'm Jerry. That's Matt, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, everyone.
Your weekly horoscope with Jerry and Matt.